I'd always had very few regrets to begin with. So it wasn't about looking back in any horror other than at some of the clothes that we chose to wear.
Yeah, well,
Roger Waters thought his words would disappear into the noise of another long interview.
It doesn't matter.
But I think
Ozzy Osbourne, who just died, bless him.
The kind that fills headlines for a day before vanishing. But what he said this time did not fade. It echoed across the rock world like a fault line cracking open beneath the stage. The man who helped define Pink Floyd, a name spoken with equal parts admiration and controversy, sat in a quiet studio and did something no one expected. He went after Ozzy Osbourne. He didn't just critique his music. He questioned his entire legacy, calling Ozzy's influence exaggerated, his career more spectacle than substance. It was a small comment, tossed casually into conversation, but in rock culture, words like that hit like thunder. Within hours, clips from the interview flooded every corner of the internet. Fans reposted it on Instagram, debated it on X, and dissected it on TikTok. Some defended Roger, others condemned him, but most were just stunned. Because whatever your taste in music, one thing remains sacred: you do not disrespect Ozzy Osbourne. The Prince of Darkness isn't just a singer. He's an institution, a survivor of everything that should have destroyed him: addiction, fame, chaos, time. To question him is to question the very soul of rock and metal itself. At first, the backlash came in ripples. Tony Iommi, Ozzy's brother-in-arms from the Black Sabbath days, posted a single line that said everything without needing a speech. Without Ozzy, there's no Sabbath. End of story. Robert Plant quietly liked the post, and in the coded language of rock legends, that like spoke volumes. Paul McCartney, when asked during a BBC interview about the growing controversy, didn't say Roger's name, but his tone gave away his stance. "There are artists who talk," he said softly, "and artists who change the sound of music. Ozzy? He's the latter." And just when the smoke seemed to settle, someone unexpected picked up the microphone: Jon Bon Jovi. He was doing press for a charity concert in New York when the question came up. The reporter hesitated, almost afraid to ask, but Bon Jovi just smiled, that calm, steady smile of a man who has seen the highs and lows of fame and still remembers where he came from. "You know," he said, "I've been around long enough to know what real legends look like. And Ozzy? He's one of them." That single line hit the internet like lightning. Clips of his interview went viral within hours, shared across fan pages and news outlets alike. But Bon Jovi didn't stop there. He leaned forward, voice steady but firm. "Ozzy has done more for rock and heavy metal than most people realize," he said. "He's not just a singer, he's a pioneer. Black Sabbath didn't just play music. They created an entire sound, an entire era. If you listen to any heavy band that came after 1970, you'll hear a piece of Ozzy in there." The journalist fell silent. Bon Jovi's tone wasn't defensive or angry. It was reverent, protective, and absolutely certain. "To dismiss that contribution," he continued, "is unfair. And honestly, a little disrespectful." The reaction was immediate. Fans who grew up on Bon Jovi's anthems and Ozzy's growls suddenly found common ground. Two generations of rock collided in mutual respect. Bon Jovi's words weren't rehearsed, they came from the heart. He wasn't defending a friend, he was defending a foundation. "We all have opinions," he went on, "and sometimes we don't agree on what matters in music. But one thing we should all agree on is respect." Ozzy's battled health issues. He's faced personal demons, and yet he continues to inspire. That's the mark of a true icon. There was something almost poetic about the moment, a younger legend standing up for one of the oldest. The crowd listening to Bon Jovi that day didn't just hear admiration. They heard loyalty, the kind that's rare in the music world today. Within hours, his clip had over 1 million views. Hashtags like the Respect Ozzy and Stand With Ozzy began trending. Metallica's Lars Ulrich reposted Bon Jovi's interview with the caption, "Respect where it's due." Slash followed with a photo of him and Ozzy, arms around each other backstage. Captioned simply, "The man defined metal, period." Even Pink Floyd fans, loyal to Roger for decades, began calling his comments out of touch and unnecessary. One viral comment under the original interview read, "We love your music, Roger." But sometimes silence says more than words. Ozzy himself, meanwhile, stayed quiet. No posts, no public responses, just silence, the kind that only someone who's been through everything can afford to keep. Sharon Osbourne, however, wasn't as restrained. When asked about the remarks during a talk show appearance, she gave the kind of smirk that says trouble's coming. Roger has every right to his opinion, she said, but opinions don't change facts. And the fact is, Ozzy is still here, still loved, still relevant. That's more than I can say for some people who think they invented music. The audience erupted in applause. It was classic Sharon, sharp, direct, and unafraid to swing. Within hours, clips of her comment went viral, feeding the fire Roger had lit even further. But beyond the internet drama, something deeper was happening. People began reflecting on what Ozzy had truly represented for decades. His story wasn't about perfection. It was about survival. Every scar on his life was a chapter in rock history. The man who bit the head off a bat on stage, who turned chaos into theater, who was both feared and adored, he was more than a musician. He was a symbol of what it means to never quit, even when the world laughs at you. Bon Jovi understood that. So did every artist who'd ever faced a crowd that didn't believe in them. We've all walked different paths, Bon Jovi said later in the same interview. But we share the same stage in history. For me, rock and roll was never about tearing each other down. It was about lifting each other up. Those words resonated beyond the music scene. Fans, journalists, even critics began echoing that message. What Roger Waters had accidentally done was remind everyone how much unity still existed in a genre often seen as divided. And that unity had a face, Ozzy Osbourne's. As days passed, the story refused to die. More artists spoke out. Gene Simmons from Kiss, Rob Halford from Judas Priest, even newcomers who grew up idolizing Ozzy's madness-filled career. They didn't just defend him, they celebrated him. Social media turned into a living museum of his influence. Videos of his earliest performances resurfaced, grainy and wild, showing the young man who once screamed into microphones like he was summoning something ancient. The comments were flooded with gratitude, nostalgia, and awe. "This is what real music looked like," one said. "No filters. No politics. Just passion." Meanwhile, Roger Waters' team quietly removed the controversial clip from several official channels. But the internet never forgets. Fans re-uploaded it, pairing it with Bon Jovi's response, turning the feud into a digital debate about legacy, ego, and what it truly means to last. Waters, perhaps realizing the backlash wasn't fading, stayed silent too. No clarification, no apology. Just a void where words had once been loud, and maybe that was for the best. Because in the echo of that silence, one truth stood taller than the rest. Ozzy Osbourne didn't need to say a thing. His life had already answered the question. You don't survive 5 decades in music by accident. You survive because you are the music. Every show, every lyric, every chaotic moment, Ozzy had bled for his art in a way few could understand. He wasn't supposed to still be alive, much less adored. Yet here he was, inspiring musicians half his age, commanding stages and reminding everyone that rebellion doesn't age. It evolves. Jon Bon Jovi's words weren't just a defense. They were a mirror reflecting the soul of rock itself. A reminder that respect doesn't fade when the lights do. At the end of the day, he said in the final minutes of that interview, legends don't need defending. But sometimes it's good to remind people why they're legends in the first place. He smiled, leaned back, and added, Ozzy doesn't just sing rock, he is rock. Those words lingered long after the interview ended. They were quoted in magazines, remixed in tribute videos, even printed on fan-made shirts. Because they captured something pure, a truth that cuts through time and trends alike. Roger Waters may have started this storm, but what he really did was unite a generation that had forgotten how much they owed to the chaos, courage, and creativity of Ozzy Osbourne. The backlash wasn't just anger, it was love in disguise. It was the world saying thank you in the loudest way it knew how. The interviews, the reactions, the endless posts, they all built toward a single message. You can criticize, but you can't erase the man who helped shape the sound of rebellion. In the end, that's what this story became, not a feud, not a scandal, but a reminder. A reminder that true icons outlive the noise. They outlast the gossip. They endure the attacks. Because legends don't fade, they echo. And Ozzy's echo still shakes the ground of every stage he ever stood on. The cameras can turn away, the interviews can end, but the music stays. It hums in every amp, every riff, every voice that dares to scream into the dark. Ozzy's legacy doesn't need defending anymore. The world has already done that for him. And as the guitars fade, as the headlines move on, one truth still burns beneath it all. The Prince of Darkness never needed to fight for respect. He earned it. Every song, every scar, every scream, because legends like him, they don't die. They just keep playing. The lights dimmed across the stage, as if the world itself knew it was time for the music to speak louder than words. The air inside London's O2 Arena carried a strange electricity that night, one that hummed not from amplifiers, but from emotion. There was no press conference, no Instagram post, no televised apology, just a stage, a mic, and a shadow that stepped into the light. Ozzy Osbourne, dressed in black as always, took slow, careful steps toward the front, his cane tapping lightly against the floor. The audience went silent, thousands of faces frozen in reverence. After weeks of chaos, insults, and headlines that twisted every sentence into battle, the man himself had arrived. And yet he didn't look angry. He looked calm, grounded, like someone who had nothing left to prove. He reached for the microphone, paused, and simply said, "It's good to be home." The crowd erupted into thunder. It wasn't just applause, it was release. Months of debate, rage, and defense melted away in a single sound. For the first time since Roger Waters' remarks ignited a storm across the rock world, Ozzy was standing before his people, and in that moment, it became clear. He didn't need revenge. He just needed the music. Behind him, the massive screen lit up with images that spanned 5 decades, grainy footage of a young man screaming into microphones, footage of chaos, laughter, and the kind of rawness that can't be faked. Every clip reminded the audience that this wasn't just a singer. This was a survivor who had lived 1,000 lives on stage. Tony Iommi stood off to the side, guitar in hand, ready to play beside his oldest friend once more. Sharon was watching from backstage, her eyes glistening as she mouthed the words, "You show them." And he did. The first chords of War Pigs echoed through the arena like thunder rolling over the earth. The crowd roared, not just singing along, but screaming every word like a declaration of loyalty. Every note was defiance, every lyric was proof. Ozzy's voice cracked in places, his body slower than before, but the soul was untouchable. You could see it in the way he gripped the mic stand as if holding on to history itself. By the second song, Crazy Train, something magical happened. The cameras panned across the crowd, and faces weren't just smiling, they were crying. Young fans who'd discovered him through documentaries stood beside old metalheads who had followed him since 1970. Generations united under a single voice, and for once the noise of division was gone. The entire world seemed to move in rhythm with him. Halfway through the set, Ozzy looked up at the screen where images of his life continued to play. The early days of Black Sabbath, the solo tours, the infamous TV years, the near-death moments, the comebacks. He chuckled softly between breaths and said, "They told me I'd never make it past 30. I guess they were wrong." The arena erupted into laughter and cheers. There was something beautifully haunting about that night. It wasn't just a concert. It was an unspoken message to everyone who had ever doubted him, misunderstood him, or tried to bury his name beneath their own. Roger Waters' comments had tried to question Ozzy's influence, but this was the answer. You can't erase a man whose music still moves souls decades later. After the set, when the lights dimmed again, Ozzy took a deep breath and looked out at the endless sea of faces. "I've made a lot of mistakes," he said quietly. "I've done a lot of crazy things, but I've always tried to give you everything I had. Because without you, there's no me." He tapped his chest twice and nodded, a silent gesture of gratitude that meant more than any speech. And then, almost like fate itself was scripting the moment, Jon Bon Jovi walked out onto the stage. The crowd gasped. 2 icons, different eras, different styles, same fire. Bon Jovi raised a mic, smiled, and said, "You didn't think I'd let you have the last word, did you?" The crowd went wild. Ozzy laughed, a deep, genuine laugh that filled the arena. The two hugged like brothers, the kind of embrace that speaks louder than any headline. Bon Jovi turned to the crowd and said, "There's been a lot of noise lately. A lot of talk about who matters, who doesn't. But look around you, this is who matters." The cheers shook the rafters. This is the reason we all picked up guitars, wrote songs, played to empty bars, and kept going. Because of this man right here. He gestured to Ozzy, and the camera zoomed in on the legend's face, glistening with tears. "Legends don't fade," Bon Jovi continued. "They evolve. They adapt. and they keep inspiring long after the rest of us have gone quiet. The two shared the mic for one final song, a stripped-down, haunting version of Changes. The audience didn't sing along at first. They just watched, mesmerized. Ozzy's voice, cracked and fragile, carried a weight that no auto-tune could ever replicate. When the chorus came, the crowd joined in, thousands of voices rising together in something that sounded less like a performance and more like prayer. When the song ended, Ozzy simply stood there, soaking it in. The applause went on for minutes, longer than most artists could dream of. And then he did something unexpected. He reached down, kissed the microphone, and placed it on the floor. A symbol, a message. The Prince of Darkness was saying goodbye to the noise, but not to the music. Backstage, cameras captured a rare moment. Ozzy and Sharon sat together, hand in hand, in quiet reflection. "You did it," Sharon whispered. He smiled faintly. "Nah," he said. "We did it." Kelly Osbourne soon joined them, hugging her father tightly. "You didn't need to say a word," she told him. "You just had to be you." Ozzy nodded, eyes wet. "I've never been good with words anyway." News of the concert spread like wildfire. Every major outlet picked it up. Rolling Stone called it a masterclass in grace and defiance. NME wrote, "Ozzy didn't respond to criticism. He transcended it." Even artists who had stayed silent before began posting tributes. James Hetfield wrote, "Still learning from the best." Billie Joe Armstrong from Green Day shared a photo of young Ozzy with the caption, "The original punk." The message was clear. The rock world had closed ranks around one of its own. Meanwhile, Roger Waters' silence grew heavier by the day. His team issued no further statements, and fans noticed his social media comments section slowly filling with messages like, "Say sorry to the king" and "Respect the ones who paved the way." Some defended him, of course, but the balance had shifted. The world wasn't interested in controversy anymore. It wanted reverence. Weeks later, Ozzy was invited to accept a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Classic Rock Honors. He arrived on stage slowly, cane in one hand, Sharon by his side. The crowd stood before he even reached the mic. It was less an award ceremony and more a coronation. When the applause finally quieted, he spoke softly but clearly. "You know," he said, "people talk a lot about legacy. About who's better, who's best. But at the end of the day, none of that matters. What matters is love, music, the people you reach." He paused, emotion breaking through. "I never thought I'd get here. I'm just a lad from Birmingham who liked to make noise. And look where that noise got me." He smiled, looked up at the ceiling as if speaking to the ghosts of rock legends past, and whispered, "Thank you for listening." The audience rose again, this time with tears in their eyes. And in that moment, there was no Roger Waters, no feud, no debate. There was only unity. Outside the venue that night, fans left candles, posters, and handwritten notes that read, "Thank you, Ozzy." One sign stood out among the rest. It said, "You can question his music, but you can't question his heart." Over the next few days, social media transformed into a digital museum of his legacy. Clips from the concert flooded every corner of the internet. His smile, his trembling voice, that final song. Young artists began covering Changes and Paranoid as tributes. A new generation discovered the man behind the myth. For them, Ozzy wasn't just a figure from their parents' playlists. He was proof that authenticity never dies. Jon Bon Jovi later shared a final post, a photo of the two from that night, arms around each other, captioned simply, "You can't cancel greatness." The comment section filled with hearts and lightning emojis. Tony Iommi commented, "The Godfather still reigns." Sharon reposted it with 3 words, "Forever my king." Weeks turned into months, but the resonance of that night never faded. Roger Waters' remarks, once headline material, became a footnote in a much larger story, the story of how a man who was once doubted, mocked, and misunderstood ended up commanding more love than ever before. And in one of his rare interviews after the event, Ozzy summed it all up the only way he could. Sitting by a window overlooking his garden, voice faint but steady, he said, "They can say what they want. I've had a hell of a ride, but if people still remember me with a smile, then I did something right. That's all that matters." He looked down, chuckled, and added, "As for Roger, I hope he finds his peace too." We're all just trying to make some noise before the silence comes. That single line became the headline everywhere. Before the silence comes. Poetic, human, timeless. Because that's the thing about legends like Ozzy Osbourne. They don't fade away. They don't retire quietly into the dark. They linger in every note that rattles a speaker, in every teenager who picks up a guitar for the first time, in every fan who screams the lyrics of Crazy Train under the glow of stage lights. The Prince of Darkness doesn't need to fight for respect anymore. He's beyond that. His story, his voice, his madness, they've already written themselves into eternity. And somewhere in the echo of that final concert, as the last chord fades and the crowd still roars, one truth remains unshakable. Legends like Ozzy aren't made. They're born, and they never truly say goodbye. They just keep playing, forever.